So guys, back to work. Currently we are at the stage when we can persist the new user to the database table. So the next step would be the authentication of that new user, and we want it to be done automatically right after new user creation, so that we will be not required to type the credentials again, which doesn't make sense because we just have done it when created user. So we will start by creation of the restricted area, which will be called account flow, and then configure Spring Security and do some Java coding for authentication. Let's go to the flows folder and create there some new webflow definition file. First of all, let's create the folder that will contain our webflow definition file, and call this folder account. Inside we create new webflow definition file, Spring webflow definition file, and call it account flow dot .xml. I think we're not required to type extension. Okay, this is not required. Next, flow ID will be account, and finish. So the reason why we are required to create a new flow here instead of using a login flow, our previous flow, view state, or even subflow, is because these are totally different logical flows, and you should not mix them. If even if technically you can achieve everything you want, it simply will be incorrect approach. So you should learn how to differentiate things which can be included under single flow and which not. And here's our initial view state, which we will call home, and let's attach a view to it, account home dot xhtml, and let's create that view also. Copy the name, and in that account folder create new xhtml file. Next, finish, and let's just copy from our previous views so that we'll keep it easy. And first of all, we need the namespaces. Then we need the title and header injection. Let's change the text to my account home. And also we need to define the content block. So we are define content, and inside just by now we'll put some text with the heading account for username and last name, actually first name, and later we'll put here some variables. So just now we should be able to test whether we can open our newly created flow. So let's save these files and Later we'll return to them. So let's try run some test. I'll compile the application. And start the server. And as you see in the log, we see now that flow definition registry now contains 2 flows, and here we can see. So we should be able to open it. Let's type the flow name, which is account, hit enter, and success. We have title, we have heading, and now we want to secure this flow so that the restrictions is applied in order to access it. And here the Spring Security library comes into play. Spring Security is basically the well-known HCG security in the past. It was renamed to Spring Security and now is available under the Spring framework library stack. This library provides the developer with the security layer, security features and utils for your application. And we will start by configuring the Spring Security and begin with the web application descriptor file, which is web.xml, to configure some new filters. Here's it. Open it and go down, and yeah, even we put the comment here to remember to add the filters. So after the comment, I will make a pause, add some filters, and then probably explain if required. So I have added the filter with name Spring Security Filter Chain with the filter class to be loaded when our web application is loading by Tomcat, and of course the URL mapping. So this is going to be the first step in our configuration. Save this file, and we will not require to modify it in the future. So next we need to add some execution listeners to our Webflow. So let's go to the Webflow configuration and go to source, and where's our execution listeners? Here, our Webflow execution listeners. And before adding it to this list, we need to create the bean of that execution listener. So I'll go down and paste the bean declaration. So we created the bean with identifier security flow execution listener and the implementing class, and now we can add it to that list of execution listeners that Webflow use. So I'll copy one of them, and here I will use a reference to that security flow execution listener bean. Okay, done with that. Save. And the main part of Spring Security configuration will be placed in the separate file, which we'll create, and this file will be referenced in our main application context.xml, like date source config and webflow config. So I copy one of these imports and create the third resource import, which will be security config.xml. Okay, save. Because we don't have this file available, then the Eclipse is showing the error. So let's create this file in our web in folder, new simple XML file. and the name of that will be securityconfig.xml. Next, okay, finish, and here's our security config, empty. So I will paste here the namespaces required for our configuration file. Okay. We still have the error here. So now it's fine. Import statement found that file, and we can close the application context. I will add this to the manageable configuration files list. Let's scan for new configuration files. We already have 3 here, and here's our new created security config. Click OK, and now it is in the list. OK, and now we have the shortcuts to all our configuration files under the Spring elements. So good. Let's go back to our security config, and I will start pasting the configurations here, beginning with the most important, and explain the meaning of it. So the first one, so we configure here the main behavior of Spring Security. So we define tag HTTP within the security namespace and configure the attribute auto config by setting the value to true. This basically means that some of the configuration properties will be configured automatically by Spring Security. For example, those that we will not configure here explicitly. So, but we require some configurations here for our case. Yeah, by the way, you can read the documentation of that configuration here. Yeah, and here we describe which page is going to be our login page, which is our main flow, which contains the authentication form. The second is an attribute that describes the page the user will be redirected to when the authentication went successful. So this is our account flow. And the next set of configuration is the logout functionality, which starts by configuration of logout URL, which will be the application logout, and this URL will be handled automatically by Spring Security. We do not need to create any functionality for logout. It is built in the Spring Security library. So, and the last attribute is the logout success or URL. This basically means that this is a page where user will be redirected after successful logout operation. So when the user will go to the logout URL, then after logout it will be redirected to the our main flow, which is basically our authentication form again. So this is clear. The next configuration is the authentication manager, where we provide the authentication provider, which will be our user service we previously created. If you remember, it should be in the application context. Here's user service, and we point that reference of this bean here to configure our authentication manager. And here's the password encoder configuration where we say that hashing algorithm should be the MD5. So the next, because we want to use database table to hold the user credentials, we need to define the DAO authentication provider bean, where we put our own user detail service implementation that will hold all required service methods and logic. These both user service references are the same reference to our user service bean here. So in order to use our user service as a Spring Security user detail service, we will need to implement another interface in our user service. And here's our user service. So later we'll implement here a user detail service as well, and then we can use it in the Spring Security configuration. And another configuration property we set to false value is the hide user not found exception, which allows us to use our own error messages during authentication. Otherwise, it will be automatically generated by Spring Security, and I find those messages not very informative. So set this to false. Okay, and the last thing, finally, we define bean for authentication manager with the implementation class and pass to the constructor our DAO authentication provider we previously created. This one, you see, yeah? It might look quite complicated to you, and maybe it is actually. Then you should spend some time going through this, because this configuration is required in order to use Spring Security in application based on database authentication. So we're basically done with this Spring Security configuration, and the last thing we'll need to do is implement the user detail service in our user service. And I think these warnings just informs us that our user service is not, can't be passed as a user detail service here and here, because it doesn't implement the required interfaces. So I hope this will disappear when we implement the user detail service interface. Okay, let's go to our user service impl.java file and start typing user details with the control space. And we see here is the interface called user detail service from the Spring Framework security package. Hit enter, and it forces us to implement one single method. Let's go and implement that. We'll implement this after the create user method. Source implement. And here we see that we need to implement the load user by username method, which we selected here. Click enter, and now we have the empty implementation of method that returns the user details instance from Spring Framework security package, which receive the username as a parameter and throws the username not found exception. So we will implement the logic here later. Now we leave it to return null, and let's try to start our application and see if we maybe have introduced some exceptions in our application. I'll save this class, and here in security config we have the warnings, and I hope I'll close and open again security config and validate. Okay. Can't get rid of these messages. Maybe probably this is a problem of Spring Elements configuration. Let's go to the clean support config set, and yeah, we do not have the security configuration in our config, so I'll add this. Check the security config. Okay. Now it's added to config set. Click OK. And now the warnings disappear. Okay. So let's try to compile the application and see if it loads. And here, by the way, you see that in Java we can implement the multiple interfaces at the same time. So we implement our own user service interface and the Spring Security user details service. So we implement methods from both interfaces in our user service implementation class, where in create user case we use the user DAO, as well as in load user by username we'll use the same user DAO. And I'll add here some Java documentation. Instruct user details instance required by Spring Security. So basically here's the object, some heavy object-oriented programming going on. Okay, let's save this class, and I'll stop the server and compile the application. And start the server. And again, if we look in our log file, then we should see that some new listeners should appear here. For example, we see that it added flow execution listener, security flow execution listener. So I hope this will work fine. So okay, let's go to our application. Okay, application still works, and that's good. Let's try to go to our account flow, enter, and we still have the access to our account. So the next step is to restrict that access so that only authenticated users can access this account flow, and we can achieve this kind of functionality by adding one single tag to our account flow web flow definition file, and this should be in the very beginning of our flow file, before all view states and all stuff in our flow. So let's click Control Space for proposals, and we see that here's a secured tag which is intended to secure this flow. I'll click this, and here we need to pass some attributes, and this is actually the role, the privilege that user must have in order to access the contents of this flow. And in real world applications you will have two or more tables to be used together with the Spring Security. One of them will be the table that contains the roles list. But in our case, I want to keep it simple. I do not want to mess around with some roles, and it's not required for our application. Then we will use just one single role, which will be just role underscore user. And the same role I will hardcode during the authentication of the user. So okay, basically that single tag is all we need to protect our flow. So let's save it and test again and see if we can access our account. Okay. Type in the account flow URL. And when we will hit enter, the application should protect that account flow from unauthorized access. Instead of that, it should redirect us back to the sign-in form. So basically, we shouldn't go anywhere. We should stay right here where we are now, the sign-in form. So enter, and you see we are redirected back to the main flow, and we can't access the account anymore. And still it's sign-in form. So now in order to access the account flow, we need to authenticate the user and set the Spring Security context holder so that it creates the session, and only then we will be able to access that protected flow. So okay,